Hey, Pete, have you ever been fascinated by the allure of secret societies throughout history?
Are you kidding me right now, Andy? I live for this stuff. From the Freemasons to the Illuminati, I am obsessed with these clandestine groups. The Rosicrucians and their ancient wisdom, the Skull and Bones Society at Yale with its powerful alumni network. I'm drawn to them. There's something about how they offer this exclusive access to hidden knowledge. They totally capture my imagination. It's like they give this sense of belonging to something greater than oneself.
Wow, sounds like you're looking for one yourself.
Do you even need to ask? Where do I sign? How much blood do I have to give? Are there any required tattoos or brands involved? Is it my first or second born that they need?
Well, what if I told you that there's a secret society for film lovers right here at the Next Reel family of film podcasts, all proud members of the True Story FM network, and you don't have to give any blood or either of your kids?
You've got my attention, Andy. What can you tell me about this cinematic brotherhood?
When you become a member of the Next Reel family, you gain access to a treasure trove of exclusive content, early episode releases, and a community of passionate film enthusiasts who share your love for movies. It's like being initiated into a secret order where you're privy to the inner workings of our shows, including the Next Reel, the Film Board, Movies We Like, Sitting in the Dark, and CinemaScope.
But Andy, as a member, will I unlock a world of bonus content from extended conversations and behind-the-scenes insights to exclusive pre-show and post-show discussions that expand the conversations about the films we love?
Why, yes, the true power of this secret society lies in its community. As a member, you'll join an exclusive group within our Discord community where you can engage in clandestine conversations with other passionate film fans in our members-only channels.
But what about live recordings, Andy? The sacred rituals of any good cinematic order. Will these episodes be scheduled in advance so that members like me will know when to gather around the virtual pyre in real time via YouTube?
Ah, yes. Perhaps the greatest secret of all is that by becoming a member, you're not just investing in your own entertainment, you're also supporting the tireless work of our independent creators and helping to keep the magic of cinema alive and well. So if you're ready to join this elite group of film lovers and unlock the secrets of cinema, head over to truestory.fm/join. For just $5 a month or $55 a year, you will gain access to a world of exclusive content, engaging discussions, and a community that shares your passion for movies. Head to truestory.fm/join to sign up.
Andy, I can't wait for you to welcome me into the inner circle of the Next Reel family of film podcasts. I'll see you in the secret chambers. Now, when do I get my ring?
Well, we don't actually offer rings with your membership.
Tattoos or brands? When can I do that?
No tattoos.
Secret handshakes?
Tell you what, you and I can come up with our own secret handshake, okay?
No, I mean, at the very least.
Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
In a world where podcasts are a dime a dozen, one show dares to stand out from the rest.
The Film Board, a podcast unafraid to tell it like it is.
We're here for one reason and one reason only: downloads.
That's right. We review new release movies because that's what gets people's attention.
But just because we're in it for the clicks doesn't mean we don't take our job seriously.
We're part of the Next Reel family of film podcasts, and we're proud of it.
Our reviews are just as insightful and thought-provoking as any of our other film podcasts.
It's just that this podcast is all about that sweet, sweet SEO.
The nectar squoze from the tree of Bing.
We're only human, but we're also creators.
And creators eat clicks to survive.
So if you want honest, unfiltered opinions on the very latest movies right on opening weekend,
delivered with the self-awareness of a team looking for downloads,
then tune in to the Film Board,
where every download counts, but yours counts the most.
Ever wonder what bridges the gap between your favorite film genres, subgenres, and movements? CinemaScope is here to explore these connections, taking you on a thrilling odyssey through the ever-evolving art of cinema. I'm your host, Andy Nelson, and in each episode, we embark on a deep dive into the forces that sculpt the world of film. From the styles you know and love, like heist films or the French New Wave, to the ones you may not be as familiar with, like Turkish Yeşilçam or Brazilian Nordwesterns, my expert guests and I unravel the complex tapestry of storytelling, style, and innovation that defines the world of film as we unpack the myriad catalysts of change that shape these diverse styles. Whether you're a student of film, a creative professional, or simply a devoted movie enthusiast, CinemaScope is your gateway to a richer, more immersive film experience. Don't just watch movies, understand them, appreciate them, and revel in their artistry with CinemaScope. Subscribe today. Welcome to Movies We Like, part of the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network. I'm Andy Nelson, and that over there is Pete Wright.
It is confirmed Pete Wright.
On today's episode, we have invited production designer Liz Bischof to talk about Sonatine, a movie she likes. Liz, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We are thrilled to have you to talk about this movie, your career, all of that. It's going to be a great conversation.
And the exercise in contrast that exists between A Nice Indian Boy, the movie you recently worked on, and the movie you picked, Sonatine. Liz, what is happening? Do you need help? Blink twice if you're safe.
I know, Sonatine was just one of those films that left a huge impression on me. And it's not an easy film to find anymore. So you kind of have to dig to find it. And I had to double check it held up for time, but I still think it does. So it's really an interesting film.
It's great. Yeah, for sure.
We're going to dig into that in a little bit. But first, let's just talk about you, your career. How did you get started as a production designer? Like, what was the path that took you to the point you're at right now?
Oh, so I guess I started as a props maker. I built props kind of all over the world. I worked in London. I worked in Australia. I did stuff for New York. I guess all those skills kind of gave me the problem-solving skills to work in film really easily. And so when somebody invited me into the art department, it was just a very easy lateral shift, if you will. And then it just has been going since then. I think all those skills that you learn when you're building stuff out of weird things ends up being exactly what works in film as well.
Well, what were you building it for before film? If you were working as a prop maker, like, was it for stage? Is that kind of...
Yeah, I did a lot of operas. I worked for the English National Opera. I worked for the Australian Opera. And then in Canada, I did a lot of Broadway shows. And I think the last Broadway show I did was actually for New York, was Aladdin. We built it in Toronto, and then it did a sort of preview in Toronto, and then it moved to New York.
Wow. Well, and it's exciting because, I mean, there's obviously a level of crafting. You have expectations, especially with something like Aladdin. It's like, well, I don't know, maybe you do. Like, how much of it is supposed to look like, so people who have seen the Disney film go, oh, it looks like I'm like there. It's the Disney film come to life, versus how much latitude do you have to actually play as you're building these different types of things that the actors will be working with.
In terms of a Broadway show, it really comes from the designer. Same like in film. If he makes an interpretation about something, or she makes an interpretation about something that is changing something from the movies, then that's what we're building. We didn't really use we didn't look at the animated film and think about that first, or same for The Lion King. We didn't actually do that. We just, there was the designer made their designs and we kind of followed along. That's pretty much how it goes.
I do think that's one of the great gifts of the Disney adaptations for stage is the freedom you have to make something that's unique for the stage, right? I mean, the ones that I have seen have been glorious explorations of something completely unique.
The Lion King is really beautiful with those puppets and really special. It really works, which is really, really nice. And with Aladdin, I guess it was fun because I did a lot of buying and Disney really wanted a big hit for that show. So they were like, yeah, just buy stuff. And so it was like, okay, well, I need tassels from Morocco. Okay, go for it. I need lanterns from, so it was just a very nice way to shop all over the world and get things for it.
With Disney's massive credit card. That sounds
Yes,
fantastic.
exactly. It's always the best job, right? Buying. It's
Yeah.
you
Right.
know,
No
with
kidding.
somebody else's money, it's great.
Yeah, right. No kidding. Well, let's talk about that shifting point where you went from like actually making the props and coming up with something that the production designer said, this is what I want, to stepping into the role of production designer and getting to be that person who said, this is what I want. What was that? What was that like?
I studied set and costume design in Montreal at National Theatre School in Canada. So I did have all the tools to be a designer, and just certainly in my youth found that it was a really good traveling job to be a props maker.
Sure.
So, everybody was getting a bar job. I was working at a theater and using that to travel around the world. So when I came back and I was more settled, and when I was offered the opportunity to design something, I just felt that it just worked really easily. I had all the tools, I had all the skills. I think I would have enjoyed, because I didn't really do much film before I started designing. I think I did about 3 shows or 4 shows, and then I immediately went into designing it. And I think I would have appreciated maybe being an art director for a bit longer so that I could have explored how other designers function a bit more. So, because it still felt a bit like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to make this up now and do it the way I think it should go. And so there was a big learning curve for that. But, I think there's a little bit, even in my designs, in terms of the way I work, that still brings in, well, I don't know. I've been lucky enough to do stuff that is very theatrical, giant ghetto blasters on stage with people popping out of them, that sort of thing, in World's Best. So, those kind of things really play to all the theatrical skills that I have. But, I also find it interesting and challenging to make a really cool house, for instance, just to make it look so real that the actors feel like they're in their own home for that character.
I want to poke at one of those worlds that you worked on the Apple TV show, as an art director on that project. Can you talk just a little bit about that, because that's a really unique experience, right? And
Science.
Significant. What's the experience like working on a project like that, where it's not a house, it's a dystopian world where nobody can see?
For that show, my task as an art director in particular was to build the cities of Cervantes, which was huge. It was massive. It was the biggest thing I'd ever built. And you don't really think about it. You just start. And then before you know it, at the end, you're like, oh, wow, this is a big city. I think there was about 100 carpenters working under me and 60 painters. And it was, you just start at one end, I really think. Now, it was a very interesting, like the city itself, like the designer is fantastic. Caroline Hanania, she's amazing. So I learned lots from watching her work as well. But she chosen this location for the city, and it was an old generating station. So it's a huge, kind of massive concrete space, but it was in total disrepair. So it worked in its own way to feel like, I don't know, like the edge of a city. Like it was just massive concrete. So we kind of planned it as a sort of underpass area for the city to be, and they built a set extension of like what would have been the highway above them, but in total, totally destroyed in that 600-year period. As for the blindness, it was very, very interesting. We had a blind consultant, and he was great. We had a lot of our background and extras were blind as well, which was very exciting and difficult, because this was a complete sort of derelict building. So I had to make sure that all the ground was in good shape for people to walk on and for the horses to walk on, things like that. It's just, there's just big chunks of metal sticking out of the ground, things like that. So we had to really kind of make sure that it was a safe place for people to move around in.
Which is, I suppose, a key part of the show anyway, because they've created this whole community. So it needs to be designed in a way where the blind people can get around easily, because that's how they've grown to adapt to their surroundings.
Right.
Yeah. It was cold. I think we were building that city in this space in February, so it was like -20 inside the building. And
Oh, jeez.
we put like antifreeze in the paint so that it would dry, because otherwise it
Goodness.
wouldn't dry. It was
Wow.
yeah, it was a really just massive scale of build, which was fun. I really like building that sort of size. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, it is spectacular in its presence in season 2, and I think I just think the world of it. It's a show that just felt like just a bit too early in Apple TV Plus, or it may have gotten a little bit more, even more attention for what they brought to it. It's just fantastic. So it's beautiful.
Caroline's doing, I think it's called Monsters: The Legacy. I think
Yeah.
it's a fantastic series as well. Like, it's phenomenally beautiful. Same decorator, who is amazing. She's very, very talented, and it was really a pleasure to work with her and learn from her.
What a treat.
How exciting. And for something that's so kind of fantastical, and I suppose in a way, as you said, it kind of fits in with kind of that theatrical space that you had come from, of working on these big, grand theatrical sorts of designs. And the film that you've worked on most recently is A Nice Indian Boy, which also, I suppose, fits into that, because you have some fantastically grandiose weddings that you got to be part of, like kind of creating
With
these
such
things.
a small budget.
Oh, no, really?
The other opposite, polar opposite of C. With a very small, like, indie budget. Yes, we had the biggest challenge of doing 2 weddings, like that sandwich the film pretty much. So that was an interesting challenge. Great team. They managed to pull amazing things out of nowhere. So yeah, I was really lucky.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the process of designing that movie, because that one actually, like Art Directing C, where you're designing across cultures and figuring out how to derive a space that feels coherent when the entire purpose of the movie is to showcase what is different and jarring at first, right? And I have to tell you, I watched the movie this morning in my headset, and I was crying at the end. The thing was so soggy around my eyes. I just adored this movie. It is just wonderful, and it looks great. And I would like to know what kind of thinking goes into this idea of designing across cultures.
I started with the weddings, because that's where you have to start, really, and kind of unpack that and go through just a million versions of it, looking at different ones, finding something that really appeals and attaches to the story. We had an entirely different plan for the second wedding, but when our show came back up, because it went down briefly and then it came back up, we had lost some of the financing. So I had to come up with another way to do that finale wedding, or that mandap, which was super important.
Was it going to be in the barn? Was the barn going to be the major set piece?
No, it was like, our idea was to really build it in a field of yellow flowers.
Just like the film.
Yeah, so to have the wedding in the middle of a field. But because we didn't have the money anymore, we had to try to find a new version of that. And I came up with this idea that I worked back to the theater, actually, to imagine that you had a screen that you could sort of show the world of that movie kind of exploding off into reality. So that I built this sort of raked stage, and there was a translite at the back that was the field, and then we put all these flowers in to sort of give you this idea that we're kind of coming right out of the movie into real life. And that was kind of the concept for it. And I wish it was a bit bigger. I think in my head, I wish I could have made it a little bit bigger, but I think it worked. Everybody was really happy with it. I think the floor was really interesting for me, because it's a mirror floor. So it was a big challenge for the DP to use that floor, because it's so reflective. But I thought it was really important to have this, I don't know, like the floor could reflect the sky. That was my thought about it. So in a way, it was its own little theater set, if you will. It definitely felt like that when I was building it. It had a raked stage. It had, a proscenium. So, yeah, that's sort of how that came about.
But then you're balancing that with real life, right? And that's what makes this exciting is, you're really, removing yourself from all of that theatricality, the whole world of the stage and everything. And you're just creating a story about a family, about a young man, about these people who are living their lives. And you're creating homes, you're creating his doctor's office, the like I said, the photo show. Like there are so many other elements that you're also creating that need to build this world so that we can buy into the fact that we see them here in these spaces. But also, as you were mentioning earlier, a place where your actors feel like when they walk in, it's like, oh, okay, now I can really, this helps me feel like I'm understanding my character more. I can click now with this because I feel like now I'm in my space.
100%. That's, I think, my whole idea about design is those spaces have to feel like the character belongs there. There have to be things about the character that live there, that even if it was just yesterday's lunch or, whatever it is, that gives a feeling of time in that space for them. So the family house was, well, we went back and forth with several houses. This one just had so much production value to it. Originally the story was supposed to take place in San Francisco. And it was the closest we could find to San Francisco in Vancouver. And it worked really well, I thought.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah. And then it's also finding the right way, like the home that gives you the best potential for shooting too. So, interesting angles, interesting depth.
Awesome staircase.
The staircase was amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
The details are amazing, and yeah. So it was a good location to do. And especially because there's that scene, the whole scene where everything unravels is such a long scene. We were worried that it might get boring in that one room with all of that stuff happening, but it never got boring. I actually thought it was really a very strong scene.
Talk about your working relationship with Roshan Sethi. This is the second film that you've done together, I think?
It is.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. He is fantastic. I love working with him. Every time I work with him, I learn stuff. I learn interesting ways to further the story. It's a very, very collaborative process working with him. He likes to keep a very round table where the ideas can come from anywhere, which I really love. I think everybody can have a great idea. And if it is incorporated into the film, it just makes it a stronger film. So from the director's assistant to the designer, however the shots are laid out, he takes a lot of contributions from everybody to create his stories. And it's a very lovely way to work. It's just, I think every time I work with him, I learn new things. It's great.
It's fantastic.
He's my favorite. So,
what is when you're on set, we've talked a little bit about just what your objective is to make space for the performers, but what sort of direct relationship do you end up having with Karan and Jonathan, and in terms of making the space right for your principals? Do you work with them in the context of the job?
No, I don't usually, because they come in so late. The director has the biggest sort of feedback into how those spaces go. Roshan gives me a lot of freedom. So in a lot of those spaces, it was like, I just, I have this vision for Billy's space, for instance, Jonathan Groff's friend's house. I have this vision. I had sort of Burning Man kind of artist
apartment.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was kind of the idea behind that. And then I also like it if my decorator contributes. So they start bringing me all these crazy things. I'm like, yes, this is perfect. Put it all in. So the house was just like overflowing with things. And I remember the owner of that apartment coming up and saying, like, could you just leave it like this? So and same with the gay bar. That was kind of the same idea, like that everybody sort of contributes a little bit and somebody has an idea and then we kind of just grow it into this amazing thing. And it was really fun. It was really fun.
So the gay bar was a built set, not a found set?
It's built right. Yeah. It was a bar that we turned into a gay bar. Yeah. And all the cowboy stuff we added to it as well. Yeah.
Outstanding. I imagined there was going to be a story about finding this little hole in the wall cowboy gay bar, but it's almost better to know that you imagined it into existence.
Yeah, it's all built. Yeah. I mean, there was basically the bones, like the tables, the chairs, and the stage were there, and we brought in the mechanical bull, and we created all of that as well.
Outstanding.
Super fun and very flamboyant. And again, I can't say enough about my set deck team. They were really 100% dedicated to it and did a great job of finding stuff.
How big was your team on this film?
Very small. In terms of the whole art department, we had, I don't know, set deck had a kind of rotating team because we were trying not to do any overtime hours. So
Gotcha.
we had a kind of we had teams in sections.
Yeah.
So we had a bigger team at that time, but not everybody was there.
Actually,
so,
they're right.
Yeah. For my actual art department, like for the graphics, I had one graphic designer who was fantastic, and art director and coordinator who also did a lot of the graphics. So it was a pretty small team, small but mighty. They really worked hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I think there's such a process in films like this where you really are working to kind of create a whole world. You're working with the actors. You've got a set schedule, and we're going to be on this set this day, this set this day, this set this day. You also need to make sure that somebody's going out and taking pictures of the actors in different costumes so that you can actually have all of those photos prepped and ready to actually decorate these spaces. Like there's all these different things that involve the pre-production and just all the way through trying to get it all ready. And then I don't know, I mean, how much do you find you end up working? I'm assuming a lot of it comes from Russian, but from just involving like the cinematographer, the costume designer, so that all of it kind of melds together. Like, are you having regular communication with those other departments so that things fit together, or is it all Russian?
No, we work all together. It's definitely a collaboration. I mean, I'm seeing the costumes and the colors and her boards, and she's seeing my boards, and the DP has a say in colors as well, because once the lights are added, that's going to change everything as well. So, tones and colors, we talked about it all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting to talk to. Some people are like, the director is the one person that we all go to. It's like, they're the vision. But it's nice. I like the feel of spaces where there's this real collaborative, like family feel. And in a film like this, I think that really enhances it, because you can almost feel it as you watch the film. Like you feel like this is something where everything feels thought about and in that family scope.
It was a family. I mean, even the producers have taken a spin at being in the art department at one point, because
Nice.
they painted one of the sets for me and we didn't have enough money for the paintery. So I like it when producers roll up their sleeves and get involved. It means that they really cherish this project, I think.
Absolutely.
And definitely they all got involved, and it was great. They were all honorary art department members, if you will. So it was good. Yeah.
Well, what a treat. What a treat. It's just an exceptional rom-com. It's exactly the kind of heart that we need. I'm so glad that you worked on it, because I don't know that I would have stumbled on it accidentally, right?
Before we started this film, I watched Moonstruck and My Big Fat Greek Wedding, because they were two rom-coms that involved family so much. And this film was really about family. It's about how family deals with your life, really. When I read the script, I mean, there's one scene that I teared up at when I read the script. So I knew it was going to be, wow, this is going to be so powerful. And I have to say, like, at that scene, I still cry. I know it's coming, but I still cry because it's just so touching. It's the scene with Jonathan and the dad.
Yes.
Yes. That's
In the kitchen.
That's in the kitchen.
That's it for me too. That's the waterworks. Because so much of the movie, like thematically, the movie addresses something we all face, which is the picture we paint in our heads about what our parents think of us that is not true. And being afraid to confront it because we believe it so deeply in our hearts that surely that is truth when it is not true. And that scene is just so liberating and feels so relatable. Yeah, I mean, it's just such a gift in the script. It's such a gift. And the movie handles so much of that really, really well, coming to terms with these parents who figure out how to say what they've needed to say all along. It's lovely. You're right. That's going to hit me again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a nice one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film that I think anyone can appreciate, really.
It's doing well, so I hope it continues to do so.
Absolutely.
In its limited release, I think it's on its week 8 now.
Great.
In the theaters. So,
can you tell us anything about Getaway? Is there much to reveal yet? I don't know what stage that's in. I know that's your next big project that you're doing.
Yeah, so I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about it yet. It's it's kind of a black comedy.
Uh-huh.
Jason Biggs' first directorial debut, I guess.
Yeah.
And he also stars in it. It's about a couple that kind of are trying to make sure their marriage isn't falling apart. So they go off to kind of have a special romantic weekend and everything goes completely haywire. and I don't know if I can say much more. There's There's blood. That's all.
Okay, gotcha.
There you go.
There will be blood.
Yes,
looking
a little
forward
bit of
to
blood.
that. Well, and I think that this will be an interesting experience for you because I just imagine working with a director who's also starring in the film. Their headspace is a little kind of focused in different places because they also have to really kind of be in the space where they're performing. And they're counting that much more on their department heads like you to carry that load and to really be reliant upon you to make sure that you understand what you're doing, you got everything ready, and you're giving them everything they need. So they don't have to worry about that stuff. They can just focus on, the shots.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It was a good one too. It was really interesting to do.
Yeah. Do you have any idea when we can expect that one?
They said they were going to try to put it out for some of the festivals. So
Okay.
I'm not sure if that means it's happening this year or it's coming into the next year. I think we're almost hitting the end of the festival.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine
time.
that probably means Sundance in January, South by Southwest next March, things like that.
When is Tribeca?
Tribeca might be toward the end of the year, yeah, and
So it might be Tribeca that they're heading for, or they're hoping for. I don't know yet.
Okay.
I think they're definitely going to try for a little bit of the film festival circuit first.
Excellent. Well, it should be a thrill, and I'm excited to see that Jason Biggs is shaking things up and stepping into the director's chair. So that should be cool. Well, let's use this opportunity to shift the directions and start talking about Takeshi Kitano's Sonatine. Or should I say, Beat Takeshi? Who knows?
Beat Takeshi. Another director, star, producer, writer, editor.
A little bit of everything.
He does it all.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Where did you first, do you remember when you first saw this movie?
I saw it, I think, when it first came out. I was living in the Netherlands. I ended up studying in the Netherlands again. And it was he was a film festival favorite in Rotterdam for the Rotterdam Film Festival. So he often premieres his films there.
Oh, interesting.
I saw it there. I think it was a period of time where, I don't know, I think I was so impressed with the poetry of the story. This big, beautiful, poetic section in the center of the movie where they're all just sort of kind of in a bubble of their own, killing time. And, it's got some theatrical elements too. It's got like Waiting for Godot or something in there, that feeling of waiting in time and space and this beautiful landscape that they use to do these, I don't know, like revert back to their childhood. And I just found that it was so It was a yakuza movie, but it was not a yakuza movie because it was too poetic
No.
to be
Right.
Yeah.
like a minimalist yakuza movie, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
It's a meditation on crime and identity.
Well, and those moments are so interesting because I found it to be just an interesting exploration in people who, I mean, we all grow up as kids, we all grow up playing these games that they're playing, but they've chosen a particular path in life that has led them to this violent world where murder is kind of a regular part of their business as needed, right? And here we see them kind of reverting to, again, going back to playing some of those silly games and stuff. But you can see how that violence they can't let go of. And it's kind of crept into what they're doing and their behaviors. And it's like, that was such a fascinating element for me where it's like, it's like they can't get past that anymore. They can't go back to a simpler time. They try, but it's now part of them.
I agree 100%. I think that's how it comes to its end as well, like almost in resignation at the end of the film. But yet the poetry of those scenes on the beach for me are I think, and I think the first time I saw it, you're waiting. You're actually just waiting for the violence to happen because it starts with violence. And so you're in this moment of like, there's this kind of, I guess, a kind of pressure of knowing that something violent is going to happen. And yet it's so poetic and so joyful in these little moments. I just found that was a really interesting contrast. And he's so good at that. I did see him speak in Rotterdam at one point, and he said that death he often sees death as funny. And it's true, like all the scenes where people die, there's a kind of almost, the reaction is almost kind of a black humor feeling to it while they're just staring, at the camera stunned. And I think that's also an interesting, I don't know, maybe that's just because of who he is in terms of him being this big comedy star in Japan and finding this way to make these serious movies, but there's still comedy in it. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. He's an interesting performer. And I have to say, like, I've seen him as an actor in other films before, but this was the first thing that I've seen that he has directed, which, as I was looking through his stuff, I'm like, how have I missed all of these films? Like, there are so many films that sound so interesting, but I mean, it sounds like, you have had more experience with him, possibly even having seen films of his before you went to see Sonatine. So you kind of already knew what to expect with him?
Sonatine was the first one
It was,
I
okay.
saw, and then I went back and watched Violent Cop, which I think is also, the opening scene of Violent Cop is so interesting because it's a scene of kids and they're beating up this old homeless man, and you never see the kids. You only the whole shot is just focused on, and it's going in a circle on this homeless man. And I remember being very impressed by that shot because it really focused how the violence was affecting this human person. So, but then his later films were interesting too because he was in a really big motorcycle crash or car crash or something, and he ended up having to do some therapy, and he ended up painting. And then all his paintings end up in his film, and they're beautiful actually. So, I guess that the artist in me really likes, I guess, his aesthetic of how he puts things together. In terms of design, it's like this weird minimalist design, and yet there's like sharp stabs of color that are in the film, like, from the red. Like I just designed a little yakuza set for another show, so it's funny. And I had to go back to that film and go, oh, there's this gaming scene, like, and there's these red bucket chairs, and they're like this dark red, and there are a couple of other spots where he's using red, or he's using this bright sky blue, like the car is this sky blue, and so there's these pockets of color in the landscape that I think are super interesting and chosen, like the dress that the girl he rescues is wearing in the last scene is red and blue. It's exactly the color of the car and exactly the color of blood. Like, it's just an interesting kind of like theme that he runs through the film that I find cool to look at, I think. So yeah, there's just those small, like the frisbee Like everything I think those colors are chosen for a reason. So it might not be that there's a huge amount of added design to the locations that they found, but they thought about the colors that they added to it, which I like very much.
Absolutely.
It is so beautiful, and it gives me that such a meditative or contemplative vibe. And all along the way, we get these portrayals of these criminals. And we've been talking about this in some other shows, the kind of natural buffoonery that comes from the portrayal of mobsters and police officers in Asian cinema. Like there's a natural sort of lampooning that happens when you take these characters and give them the part that you wouldn't see in another crime movie. And the fact that so much of this movie exists in a space where we get to learn that even hardened criminals can have existential crises about their identity and their career.
It really is an existential. The whole film is an existential crisis, really.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
And I found that it's so grounded and striking that the colors, the palette that they choose for so much of the movie is, such a striking contrast in color. Like even I'm looking at the poster right now, that blue fish and the bright red, the blood red, like it's jarring visually and sort of represents for me so much of that uncertainty, so much of that I have to choose a fork in the future. And that space, I think, is really resonant in this movie.
I read somewhere, I'm not sure exactly, but the title comes from the idea that he had said somewhere that a sonatine is when you're learning how to play the piano. It's the moment where you have to start choosing what type of music you're going to play. Like you hit, and I thought that's really interesting because that's the actual movie. Like it's
Which direction do I go?
This is the crossroads. Yeah, like the road is so important. And he didn't have a lot of training, so I don't know. I like all those shots. I think they're really composed. In often cases, they remind me of still lives. That there's that one scene when they're all kind of lying in the car, like they're all sort of around the car. And I just thought like it's a painting, really. It's just like, the film is stopped for a second. We could paint that as a picture. So I really love his composition for shots. And like the shots are so long. But maybe that was, there was a period of time when they were longer. I don't know. Maybe that's, now they're really short. I don't know.
Right. MTV, what have you done to us?
It broke us all.
Well, it's interesting because like we have these long takes, but what I find so interesting is like the way that he incorporates them into like conversations where he almost purposefully chooses during a conversation, for example, to cut back and forth from one person to the other, but when he cuts, it's the person who's not speaking. And it's just it's almost like a still shot of them listening. And then as soon as the other person stops talking, it cuts to them as now the person that we're no longer looking at is talking. And it's just like, what an interesting way to like, it created this sense of like, I mean, and it fits the character's internal workings of just being stuck in this, like, kind of frozen in this place where he can't figure out which direction to go. And everything just kind of was still and frozen. And it was just fascinating to see.
I agree. It's cool.
There's a certain element of bearing witness. And I couldn't help but think like, is this message, this sort of visual message, all about how, we're all just bearing witness to the events around us and there is a lack of control, which amps up the uncertainty in the thread of the film that, we're going to focus more on the people who are watching the people taking action to learn about the lessons of human interaction in that sequence. I especially around the table and dealing with the big boss and those sorts of sequences, I think were really special in the act of bearing witness.
I think that there's sometimes like some directors, and it's actually something I find a little fascinating, is the space between what's happening, so that how we're looking at that space, because when we're watching a film, it's really directed. And yet there's all this other space that we're we're not seeing. So I find that I personally find that space really interesting, which is probably why I like his films. But with other directors too, when you're filming a shot and really filming in between the two people rather than the two people, it's a very interesting way to get across how much distance there is in between their conversation or whatever it is. So I think his way of doing that really marks how everybody is there present, and we're here, we're watching all of those little things that we don't normally look at. I guess maybe that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting element there. And I find that the way that Murakawa is moving through this life, like it's interesting because there is this sense of existentialism that we've been talking about, but it also kind of is like boredom, and they can't quite, like, it seems like they're kind of bored as they're in this waiting game trying to figure out what these families are going to do, and it allows him to kind of like, it's almost like that allows him to burrow deeper into that existential crisis that he's having, right? Like, had he not gone through this, like, would he be in this, as you said, this bubble that puts him into this headspace? And I think for his arc, and I think that's what's so interesting about his kind of like the character arc that we have with his characters. He kind of, I mean, he starts as this tired gangster. He doesn't seem overly excited to do these jobs. He expresses to one of his guys that he kind of wants to leave, but he's just kind of going through everything, right? And looking for some peace, but it's only because of this moment that arises that it seems he's actually able to get there. And I just wonder, like, what does that say about the human condition? Like, do we need these bubbles in order to actually take a step back and realize, what the hell am I doing? Why have I been on this path for God only knows how long?
But it's funny because, in a way, the morbid way of it is he goes full circle and he realizes he can't leave it. So do we need these bubbles? I mean, I think we all need these bubbles. We're always running and moving. I think
Right.
his films have a tendency to, I guess, to breathe. There's something meditative about them as well, even with the violence. The violence has a kind of, I don't know, they're kind of like exclamation points through the film, I find. And
Yes.
then there's this whole meditative world where he is sort of exploring, I guess, his life in a way. So yeah, I think it's really good that, yes, I think everybody should have a meditative part to them and figure out whether they, are doing the right thing. But in his case, I feel like the sad part about it, and I like that it's sad at the end, because like it's almost like with the same way that he laughed about playing roulette on the beach, he ends it, and in the same simple manner. There's no heaviness to it. It's just there. It's just done.
Right.
So
right.
I thought that was really interesting too. And I guess I like movies that don't always end with the perfect happy endings, or I like them to leave me with things to think about or why it was. But in this particular case, like all that buildup of tension, thinking that things were going to happen or they were going to get caught, like where the story was going to go, and then to have that sort of big bubble of sort of, I mean, I love that sumo wrestling game on the beach. I think
Right.
it's one of my favorite. It's the most impressed scene in my memory is that how they did that, and I really thought it was just a lovely moment of joy that they were all having, and I just So then they all die. So
Yeah, they all die, and he just I start the movie, and I get a sense as his guys just start dying, and how practically all of the characters around violence react to it. Starting when they get to the new town, and a sniper, like shoots through the window, and they're like, well, they're just saying hello. That it starts there, and you start this feeling the weight of inevitability that this is not going to go well. He knew it wasn't going to go well from the moment he was sent there, and it's going to end on a beat of just sort of separating emotion from the practical act of endings, and he's going to do it under his control. And I think it's beautiful. It's it's violent, but also subdued. And I think it's beautiful. And I still am left with a big question mark in my head about how I feel about it. It's one of those that's going to need to settle a little bit, right? I found it was quite moving. I want to turn attention to production design and what you find inspirational in watching a movie like this for your current work. Not asking, of course, unless you've thrown some intentional Sonatine montages in or homages in your work, but what do you take from it?
I just had to redesign a small reshoot, and they needed a yakuza clubhouse in Osaka for a film called Normal with Bob Odenkirk. It's just the reshoot, so it was just a small thing, and I was searching for the grittiness of the yakuza, and I really do feel that 90s vibe of Tokyo, the way he shows it, has a kind of grittiness that the set looked nothing like that, by the way.
Yeah.
Not at all. It didn't look like that at all. It had like something else that was, that the director wanted. So, and I was just, like I said, I'm just doing a reshoot. So I'm just designing a very tiny piece of somebody else's vision. So I have to kind of keep with the parameters that the original designer has. But I started there because that's the grittiness of a yakuza for me will always be entrenched in his films. That's like that 90s. I lived in Japan for a year. When did I do that? In the 90s too, I guess. So I do remember like spaces like that. Maybe they're a little uglier in his version than some of the spaces, but that had that sort of his Yakuza world has like a no filter feeling to it until you get to the beach, and then it feels like everything is beautiful and poetic, but the city itself, it feels like it's just really gritty and yeah, and kind of ugly spaces. And
Yeah, like
know,
when they first arrive in Okinawa, there's that building that they're going into, and it's like, I don't know, it's like the whole bottom level that they enter, it's just a bunch of openings. It almost was like I was like, I wasn't even sure if it was actually like a building or was it like an entrance to a bus depot or something, because it's just like openings that they kind of walk into, and then next thing you know they're upstairs. But yeah, like some of it definitely had kind of like these people are operating out of some kind of rough used buildings. Nothing was pristine and nice.
I also think that the space where they met his boss at the beginning, like they start in this kind of very uninteresting space, and then they walk into this very beautifully, highly ornate space,
Yeah,
which is
fancy
probably the
restaurant, yeah.
prettiest fancy restaurant. But they start in this space that's kind of an ugly space, really uninteresting. But I kind of like that about it. Like I think the contrasts are so interesting. I think that that's kind of a cool thing about it.
Well, and it sets up an interesting element of this world of these people who, I mean, live in the shadows, I guess is just a kind of a common expression, but it's like they aren't really able to have their meetings in like the regular spaces because they're the Yakuza. They're in hiding. And so it's always like meeting in the back room and, or the old building. It's like they don't get the really pretty spaces, and I think that was an interesting element that he kind of incorporated here.
Whereas if you think about some of the other films that shoot Yakuza, they often have the prettiest spaces. I don't know if you think about like Marvel or when they're using like the Yakuza spaces are beautifully highly designed Japanese spaces. And his spaces are just like fluorescent light, terrible furniture, and I really like that about it. And that scene in the games room when they're walking through and they collect somebody and there's another example of Red that crane that they dip him into the water with. In that gaming space, like it was such an interesting space with all these like lamps that are just lighting the tables with these green covers and these red chairs. I really like, I don't know, it felt like Japan, like at least the Japan that when I was living there that I saw, like it felt very realistic. That would have been a gaming space. That would have been a bar. Like that's what they would look like. Again, the red of the crane, that was a really interesting scene. And the total nonchalant way they watched him die was also
Yeah. Well, and that, it's an interesting bit of violence that we get in that scene that isn't necessarily the same sort of like abrupt, bloody violence that we get when they're battling each other. This was just like a day at the office, right? Like they're just sitting there having this casual conversation while they're dipping this guy in and out of the water, and then he
exactly.
drowns, and that's kind of it.
Because
And I
they
was
lose track of time. Unreal.
And I'm like, were they intending to drown him, or was this just like they were aiming to pull him up in time? They just didn't, It's,
and his reaction, like, oh well,
yeah,
right, that's it. I guess we his reaction was very nonchalant about it as well.
God, it's kind of terrifying. It makes you want to never end up in a position where you're actually like having one of these people knocking at your door saying, "Hey, we need 10%."
I don't know. Like, I'll be honest. I lived in Japan. I'm sure I met yakuza, but I never realized I was meeting yakuza. Like, there was bars you were in or things, but you just don't. Like, I didn't know. So I think they're there. They're in all those areas wherever money is being made. I'm sure that's where they are. But I certainly don't remember meeting any or understanding that I was meeting anyone. So. But the spaces were the same. Yeah, that sort of, I'd have to say the fluorescent light again, because like that's the feeling it gives me. It's just a fluorescent light in a space, like here we are,
Yeah, right. For people who aren't that familiar with Takeshi Kitano and his films, like what other ones would you recommend people check out?
Hanabi, that's a good one. He also did, I think it's called Tsuyoshi. It's a blind swordsman. It's where it's one of his latest ones, his later ones.
That's like Zatoichi, is it?
Zatoichi, there you go.
Yeah.
I couldn't. That one is, it's more classic.
Sure.
But he's still really cool. And,
he's very cool.
Hanabi is, I think, where he won his awards for, I think, was for Hanabi.
Gotcha. And that's also called Fireworks. I've seen it released as that way. Yeah, right. Well, I've got some watching to do. I've got some catching up with a lot of his stuff. Like I've seen him in stuff like Battle Royale and things like that. Like that's where I'm familiar with him. And so his face is, and I suppose that happens when you're when you act in your own films, is people see you on screen and say, hey, we want, you also become an actor. You're not just a director. And I think that, and I guess I don't know as much about him. You were saying that he actually is like a comedian also?
He's very famous. At the time he was making these films, he'd have like 2 comedy shows going, a radio show. He was writing for something else. He was like the busiest person. He was really very, very popular comedian in Japan. And then he made these films which were not so popular in Japan. They were far more popular with the foreign audiences, but maybe because they always saw him as a comedian. But I think after he had his accident, he made some, like, just, again, they're just such poetic films. They're just so beautiful. And there is more production design as he goes along. But I feel like this was the bare bones version. I don't think they had a lot of money to make it. And I think it was really the bare bones version, but it shows so much. So it still is one of my favorite films.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I was reading that, he had 4 images basically in his head that he came to when he was starting to put this together. The first was that the Yakuza had to go to Okinawa. And I guess I'm not as familiar with Okinawa, but it definitely seemed like it's like, oh, you're going to the country is kind of the way that they interpreted it.
It's the southernmost tip of Japan, I believe.
Okay, gotcha. And then the Yakuza arriving in Okinawa, the machine gun shootout, and then the main character shooting himself in the head. So those were the images that he had that he knew he wanted to incorporate into it. And then from there, it was very spontaneous as he was trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to fill all of the space around those 4 images?
Right.
And I think that's so interesting, and I suppose when you are a musician or a comedian or a writer or whatever, it's like allowing yourself that freedom, which can be hard in the world of filmmaking because it's very structured as far as production. Like we've got to get these on this day and stuff like that. But being able to say, to more fluidly kind of like roll with it and go, let's just try these out and see where we go with it. I think there's an interesting ability to being able to make a project that way that not everybody has, but I think it can lend itself to creating some interesting story points, and I think we see that here.
I don't think we do it much anymore.
Oh, I think it's hard.
No money. Yeah. There's no money for it. But I have to say, like, the idea of having those 4 points seems very much like a writer to me, because that would be those sticky notes that they put up on their board. Even when I'm designing, I work like that too. I pick the thing that impressed me the most in the script, and that's where I start the design from. So whatever it is in the script, the most important point for me, that's where I start. And if it's in a room, I start with that room. If it's out at a shop, I start with that, like, because that's where I kind of build outwards from there, and then the rest of the story kind of falls into place. So generally, it's a moment in the story. Like, it doesn't have to be like the climax of the story or anything like that. It just has to be a moment in the story that I had a very distinct visual for, and that's where I'll start.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I mean, this has been a fantastic conversation, Liz. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me again.
2 great movies.
I hope you enjoy all the rest of his movies.
Yeah.
Well, there are a bunch of them, thankfully, on Canopy, so I can just start today and not even have to think about it.
That's good. Yeah. Did you find Sonatine on Canopy too? Was that?
No, I did not find Sonatine on Canopy. That one was, I think I rented it on Apple.
Yeah, I think you have to rent it on Apple. Yeah.
Yeah. But Violent Cop, Outrage, Beyond Outrage, Zatoichi they're all on Canopy. So delightful find. This has been great.
Good.
If people want to learn more about you, are you out on the socials? You have a website that people can check you out and what you're up to?
I have a website, lizbischof.com, and I'm on Instagram. You can see I often put up like, a before and after. This is what the room looked like before. This is what it looked like once I've put stuff in it. That's on my Instagram usually.
And then in Getaway, you can throw a third one, and this is what it looks like after all the blood's been splattered everywhere.
Film has to release first, and then I'll do it.
Exactly. Wow. Well, we'll have links for everything in the show notes. Again, Liz, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was lovely to meet you both.
Likewise.
And for everyone else out there, we hope you like the show, and certainly hope you like the movie like we do here on Movies We Like. Movies We Like is a part of the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network and the Next Reel family of film podcasts. The music is Chonk Clap by Out of Flux. Find the show at truestory.fm and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Letterboxd at The Next Reel. Learn about becoming a member at thenextreel.com/membership. And if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, we always appreciate it if you drop one in there for us. See you next time.